Commander Daho stood frozen before the main screen in Earth's orbital command station. His coffee mug slipped from his fingers and crashed to the floor. No one turned to look. Every eye in the room was fixed on the broadcast coming from the Galactic Council. "This cannot be real," whispered Lieutenant Han beside him. They would not dare. But they were daring. They were doing it live for all the galaxy to see. On the screen, 50,000 human colonists knelt in long rows on the dusty surface of New Hope, the largest settlement in the Cygnus sector. Men, women, and children. Families who had built homes on what Earth's records showed as unclaimed space. A voice spoke over the broadcast. It belonged to High Arbiter Vex of the Galactic Council. His tone was flat, as if he was reading a menu and not a death sentence. "Let this be a lesson to all who encroach upon territory designated for the privileged species," Vex said. "The Council's decisions are final and not open to debate." Daho's hands curled into fists. "Get the Admiral," he ordered, his voice shaking. "Now." But before anyone could move, a blinding light filled the screen. When it faded, there was nothing left of the colony. No buildings, no people. Just flat, scorched earth where 50,000 lives had been snuffed out in an instant. The control room erupted in shouts and cries. Some officers turned away. Others wept openly. Lieutenant Han threw up in a corner. Daho stood still, his mind racing to make sense of what he had just seen. Earth had joined the Galactic Council just 3 years ago. They were told it was an honor, that humanity had proven itself worthy of a place among the stars. Now Daho understood the truth. To the Council, humans were not equals. They were subjects. The door to the command center slid open. Admiral Jin Wu entered, his face ashen. He had seen the broadcast too. "Sir," Daho said, snapping to attention. "The Council just—" "I know what they did," Jin Wu cut him off. "What I want to know is why." Officer Yuna stepped forward, her hand shaking as she held up a datapad. "Sir, according to our records, the Cygnus sector was unclaimed space when our colonists arrived 5 years ago. There was no warning, no formal dispute filed." Jin Wu's eyes narrowed, and yet the Council claims it was designated for their privileged species. "Yes, sir," Yuna continued, "but that designation appears to have been made only 6 months ago, 4.5 years after our people settled there." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The Council had changed the rules, then punished humans for breaking them. They did not even give them a chance to leave, Daho said quietly. Not a single warning. Jin Wu turned to the communications officer. "Connect me to Earth's Defense Council. Emergency priority." As the call was being placed, Jin Wu looked around the room at his officers. 300 years, he said. "The Galactic Council has ruled for 300 years because no one dares to challenge them. They expect us to bow our heads and accept this atrocity." The main screen flickered, now showing the grim faces of Earth's Defense Council waiting for news. "But they do not know humans very well," Jin Wu continued. "We do not forget our dead, and we do not abandon justice." He squared his shoulders and faced the screen. "Ladies and gentlemen of the Council," he began, "I regret to inform you that the Galactic Council has just committed an act of genocide against our people. 50,000 innocent colonists in the Cygnus sector have been executed without trial or warning." He paused, looking each council member in the eye before continuing. "Earth must respond, and our response must be one that ensures this never happens again. Not to us, not to anyone." Outside the station's viewport, Earth glowed blue and green against the blackness of space, still innocent of the storm that was about to engulf the galaxy. The Earth Defense Headquarters was a storm of activity. 12 hours had passed since the broadcast, and the planet was in shock. News networks showed nothing but the faces of the dead, teachers, farmers, engineers, and children who had sought a new life in the stars. Admiral Jin Wu sat at the head of the long table in the main conference room. Around him, 20 men and women from Earth's Unified Defense Council sat in grim silence. Some had red eyes from crying. Others looked like they hadn't slept. We all watched the same broadcast. Jinwoo said, 50,000 of our people are dead. The question now is, what will Earth do about it? General Park slammed his fist on the table. We should strike back. Show them that humans are not to be trifled with. With what? Asked Minister Lee. The Council has ships that could turn our whole planet to ash. We joined them only 3 years ago. We are the new kids at the table. Jinwoo nodded. That is what they think. He tapped a button, and the lights dimmed. A hologram appeared over the table, showing Earth's solar system, then expanding to nearby stars. For 30 years, we have been preparing, Jinwoo said. Since our first contact with alien life, our leaders knew this day might come. The hologram zoomed out further, revealing dots of light in distant star systems. Hidden shipyards, Jinwoo explained. Secret research stations. Technologies we never shared with the Council. We showed them only what we wanted them to see. Minister Lee's eyes widened. How did we hide all this? Very carefully, Jinwoo replied. And now, that caution will save us. He turned to a woman sitting quietly at the far end of the table. Colonel Su-min, you will lead our diplomatic mission to the Council. Make our case. Demand justice for our dead. Su-min stood. She was not tall, but something in her posture made everyone take notice. Her eyes were sharp, her face calm. They will not listen, she said simply. No, Jinwoo agreed. They will not. But the galaxy will be watching, and we need to be seen trying peace first. He looked around the table. Meanwhile, we prepare for war. Not because we want it, but because the Council has already declared it by their actions. All in favor of this two-part approach? Jinwoo asked. Every hand at the table rose. After the meeting, Jinwoo asked Su-min to stay. When they were alone, he handed her a small data chip. If diplomacy fails, he said quietly, you are authorized to activate Protocol Sentinel. Su-min's breath caught. Sir, that would mean. I know what it means. Jinwoo cut her off. So choose your team carefully. You'll need people you can trust with humanity's future. Later that evening, Su-min sat in her office, reviewing personnel files. Her diplomatic team would need to be perfect, smart, calm under pressure, and ready for anything. She selected Dr. Yuna for xenolinguistics. The woman could learn any alien language in days and had a gift for reading between the lines of diplomatic speech. For security, she chose Captain Tawan, a man who could look harmless but had once fought off 3 alien assassins with nothing but a dinner fork. As she worked, a news broadcast played quietly in the background. Protests had erupted in cities across Earth. People were angry, scared, and demanding action. A young reporter stood in front of a massive crowd in Seoul. Behind her, people held up pictures of family members who had died in the sickness massacre. The galaxy is about to learn something about humans, the reporter said, her voice steady despite her tears. We do not abandon our own. Ever. Su-min turned off the broadcast and looked out her window at the night sky. Somewhere up there, the Galactic Council was going about its business, believing they had taught humans a lesson in obedience. They were wrong. What they had actually done was awaken a sleeping giant. We're coming, Su-min whispered to the stars. And we're bringing justice with us. The human diplomatic ship, Peace Envoy, dropped out of faster-than-light travel near Centauri Prime, the gleaming capital world of the Galactic Council. Su-min stood on the bridge, watching the planet grow larger on the view screen. It's beautiful, Dr. Yuna said softly beside her. Hard to believe such cruelty could come from a place that looks like paradise. Su-min nodded. Beautiful shells often hide rotten cores. The Council's traffic control directed them to a small landing pad far from the main government buildings. It was a deliberate insult, one of many they had faced since arriving in the system. They're making us walk, Captain Tawan observed as they landed. The other diplomatic ships have transport waiting. Let them play their games, Su-min replied. We have more important matters at hand. The team of 5 humans walked the long path to the council tower. Alien diplomats whispered as they passed. Some looked curious, others hostile, but most seemed merely surprised that humans would dare to show their faces after the lesson the council had delivered. At the entrance to the council chamber, they were stopped by tall guards with blue skin. "Weapons check," one guard said, pointing a scanner at them. Taiwan smiled pleasantly. "We brought no weapons." The guard looked suspicious but let them pass. "Liar," Yuna whispered to Taiwan with a small smile. "I never lie," he replied quietly. "My skills are my weapons." Inside the vast council chamber, representatives from 200 species sat in rising tiers around a central speaking floor. The humans were directed to a small table at the very bottom. Another insult. High Arbiter Vex, the same official who had announced the execution, presided from a raised platform. His species looked almost human except for their golden skin and 6-fingered hands. "The council recognizes the human delegation," Vex said, his voice cold. "You may present your petition." Su Min rose and walked to the center of the floor. The chamber fell silent. "Thank you, High Arbiter," she began. "I come before this council to address the recent actions taken against the human settlement in the sickness sector." "The matter is closed," Vex interrupted. "The territory was designated for a privileged species. The humans were trespassing." Su Min didn't flinch. "I have here the original survey records," she said, holding up a data crystal. "They show that when our colonists arrived 5 years ago, the sector was unclaimed. The privileged species designation was added only 6 months ago, retroactively." Murmurs spread through the chamber. Some council members leaned forward with interest. "Furthermore," Su Min continued, "under the council's own laws, even trespassers must be given notice and time to relocate. Our people received no warning, no chance to leave peacefully." Vex's golden face darkened. "You do not understand your place, human. The council does not need to explain itself to new members. Your people needed to learn respect." "Respect." Su Min's voice remained calm, but her eyes flashed. "Is mass murder how the council teaches respect?" The chamber erupted in shouts. Some alien representatives looked uncomfortable. Others seemed outraged, not by the executions, but by the humans' audacity to question them. Vex raised his 6-fingered hand, and silence fell. "You will learn your place," he said, his voice now a dangerous whisper. "This meeting is terminated." That night, in their assigned quarters, the human team gathered to discuss their failure. "They never intended to listen," Yuna said sadly. Taiwan, who had been checking the room, suddenly held up a finger for silence. He pointed to a small device hidden behind a light fixture, a listening device. Su Min nodded in understanding. They were being watched. Taiwan slipped out and returned 10 minutes later with a small computer pad. His face was grim as he showed it to Su Min. On the screen was a message he had intercepted from Vex to the Council's military command. "Preparations for Operation Example must be accelerated. Earth will be the next lesson." Su Min looked at her team's worried faces. "It seems diplomacy has failed," she said quietly. "Just as we expected." She reached for the special communicator Jin Wu had given her. It was time to activate Protocol Sentinel. Commander Daho stood alone in a dark control room deep beneath Earth's lunar surface. Around him, screens lit up one by one, showing faces of ship captains waiting for orders. "Protocol Sentinel is active," Daho announced. "Colonel Su Min has confirmed that diplomacy has failed. The Council plans to attack Earth next." Captain Jisoo, commanding Earth's first stealth carrier, nodded grimly from her screen. "My ships are ready, Commander. We've been in position near Alpha Centauri for 3 weeks. The Council has no idea we're here." "Same for Beta Squadron," reported Captain Quan from another screen. "We're hidden in the asteroid belt of the Rigel system. Their patrols pass within kilometers and detect nothing." Daho allowed himself a small smile. For 30 years, Earth had been building ships with technology the Council knew nothing about. While publicly joining the galactic community, humans had secretly prepared for the worst. Begin Phase 1, Daho ordered. Deploy the network as planned. No engagement unless attacked. Remember, we are not starting a war. We are preventing one. Across 12 star systems, hidden human ships slipped out of their hiding places. They moved silently, protected by stealth technology that made them invisible to Council sensors. From these ships, smaller craft deployed thousands of small devices around key Council worlds. These devices formed a network that could, if needed, shut down the faster-than-light travel that the Council relied on. On Earth, Admiral Jin Woo addressed the Defense Council. Colonel Su Min will delay her return by taking an indirect route, he explained. This gives us 7 more days to complete our preparations. And if the Council attacks before then? Asked Minister Li. We're ready now, Jin Woo assured her. Just not at full strength. In a hidden base beneath Mars, engineers worked around the clock, finishing the last of Earth's new warships. These ships were smaller than Council vessels, but packed with technology that Earth had kept secret. The shield generators are at 100%, reported Chief Engineer Song. The quantum lock system is stable. This was humanity's greatest secret, a defense system that could neutralize Council weapons. The Council believed their technology was far superior to Earth's. They were wrong. Meanwhile, in space near Jupiter, hundreds of civilian ships gathered. These were not warships but transports, ready to evacuate Earth's population if the worst happened. We still hope for peace, Jin Woo told his officers, but we prepare for war. Back on Centauri Prime, Su Min and her team boarded their ship. Council guards watched them closely, expecting them to leave immediately. Change of plans, Su Min told the Council flight controller. We will be taking a scenic route home. Our people want to see more of the galaxy before tensions worsen. The controller seemed confused, but had no reason to stop them. The human ship lifted off, but instead of heading straight for Earth, it began a wandering path through several neighboring systems. This was part of Protocol Sentinel, buying time while appearing to act normally. In their ship's secure room, Su Min briefed her team. Earth is deploying our hidden assets. We need to gather more intelligence while we can. Dr. Yuna looked worried. The Council vastly outnumbers us. Even with our secret technology, can we really stand against them? Su Min's face was calm, but her eyes showed steel determination. We studied every species that ever stood up to the Council and failed. We learned from their mistakes. And what was their biggest mistake? Asked Ta-Wan. They'd fought alone. Su Min replied, we won't make that error. There are others in the galaxy who hate the Council's tyranny as much as we do. We just need to find them. As their ship moved farther from Centauri Prime, Captain Jisu's stealth fleet silently took up position in the system they had just left. The pieces were moving into place. Earth was ready. The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council glowed with soft blue light. 200 alien leaders sat in curved rows, their attention focused on High Commander Vex. The human problem requires immediate action, Vex said, his golden skin shining under the lights. They question our authority. This cannot stand. On a large screen behind him, images of Earth and its colonies appeared. Vex pointed to them with a 6-fingered hand. Their military is small. Their technology is basic. Look at their ships, primitive and few. The Council members nodded. Most species had been part of the galactic community for thousands of years. Humans were newcomers, barely worth noticing. I propose a simple solution, Vex continued. A small fleet will travel to Earth. They will destroy their orbital defenses and demand surrender. If they refuse, we target one major city. That should be enough to bring them to their knees. Murmurs of approval filled the chamber. To most Council members, this was routine, a standard way to handle upstart species. Only one voice spoke in opposition. From the back of the chamber, Ancient Observant Kira rose slowly to his feet. His species was one of the oldest in the galaxy, with skin like tree bark and eyes that had seen millennia pass. "I advise caution," Kerr said, his voice soft but carrying to every corner of the room. "Humans are not like other species we have encountered." Vex laughed. "They are primitive and weak. What threat could they possibly pose?" Kerr's ancient eyes narrowed. "I have studied their history. In just 3 centuries, they went from horse-drawn carriages to faster-than-light travel. No other species has advanced so quickly." The chamber grew quiet as Kerr continued. "More concerning is their history of warfare. When outmatched, they do not surrender, they adapt. When cornered, they fight with unexpected strategies, and they have a strange habit of overcoming impossible odds." Vex waved a dismissive hand. "Stories and myths. Their own history is full of exaggerations." "Perhaps," Kerr conceded. "But consider this. They joined our council only after developing faster-than-light travel on their own. Most species are invited centuries before achieving this. Why did humans develop so much before seeking to join us?" An uncomfortable silence fell over the chamber. Nobody had considered this question before. Vex's face darkened with impatience. "Enough of these fears. The humans need to be put in their place, and quickly. I call for a vote." The vote was taken. Only Kerr and a handful of others voted against the punitive mission to Earth. "It is decided," Vex announced. "Admiral Dex will lead our fleet to the human homeworld. They leave tomorrow." After the meeting, Kerr approached Vex in a private corridor. "You are making a grave mistake," the ancient alien warned. "At least send more ships, a full battle fleet, not just a punitive force." Vex sneered. "Do not tell me you fear these humans, Kerr." "I fear arrogance and ignorance," Kerr replied calmly. "2 traits you display in abundance." Vex's golden face flushed with anger. "The humans will be kneeling before us within a week. Their defiance will be crushed, just like every other species that has challenged us in the last 300 years. Kerr shook his head sadly. 300 years is nothing. My people remember when the council was young, when it stood for justice and peace, not tyranny. Times change, Vex said coldly. Indeed they do, Kerr agreed. And perhaps it is time they changed again. As Kerr walked away, Vex returned to his chambers to oversee the preparation of the fleet. On his screens, 40 council warships were being readied, a force that had always been more than enough to subdue any rebellious world. Vex smiled. Soon, the human problem would be solved, and the natural order would be restored. He had no idea what was waiting for him. Admiral Dex stood proud on the bridge of the Council's flagship, Righteous Power. Behind him, 40 warships moved in perfect formation. Each ship carried enough firepower to level a city. Together, they could turn entire continents to ash. "We will reach Earth's solar system in 5 minutes," Admiral, his second-in-command, reported. Dex nodded. "Prepare the announcement. We will give them one chance to surrender before we demonstrate our power." The fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of Earth's solar system. Dex expected to surprise the humans, to see them scramble their few ships in panic. Instead, silence greeted them. No ships moved to intercept. No messages came through. The solar system seemed empty and quiet. "This is strange," Dex said, frowning. "Scan for their defenses." "Nothing, Admiral," the sensor officer replied. "We detect their planets and moons, but no defense stations, no warships." Dex's frown deepened. "Move forward. Approach their home planet." The Council fleet moved deeper into the solar system. Still, no response came from Earth. "They must be hiding," Dex said. "Or perhaps they have already surrendered without a fight." As the fleet passed the orbit of Mars, the sensor officer suddenly straightened. "Admiral, I'm detecting energy readings. They're all around us." Before Dex could respond, thousands of small devices activated. They had been invisible until now, but suddenly they glowed with blue light, forming a vast web around the Council fleet. "What is this?" Dex demanded. At that moment, the main screen lit up. Fleet Commander Minho of Earth appeared, his face calm. "Council Fleet, this is Earth Defense. You have entered a restricted zone. Power down your weapons and state your intentions." Dex laughed. "You dare to give me orders? We are the Galactic Council. We have come to teach you humans your proper place." Minho's expression didn't change. "I see. Then I regret what must happen next." The small devices pulsed with blue light. Suddenly, the engines on the Council ships sputtered and died. Their weapon systems went offline. They were dead in space. "What have you done?" Dex roared. "Quantum lock shield technology," Minho explained calmly. "It disrupts your power systems. A little something we developed but never shared with the Council." Dex stared in disbelief. "Impossible. Your species is too primitive for such technology." "A useful misconception we never corrected," Minho replied. "We showed you only what we wanted you to see." Outside the flagship's windows, space seemed to ripple. Suddenly, hundreds of human ships appeared, surrounding the Council fleet. They had been there all along, hidden by technology the Council didn't know existed. "You are outgunned and disabled," Minho continued. "But unlike the Council, we do not execute people to make a point." Dex's face darkened with rage. "This is an act of war. The full might of the Council will descend upon your world." "No," Minho said. "This is an act of justice. And as for the Council's full might..." He gestured, and the screen split to show images from a dozen Council worlds. Around each planet, more human ships had appeared, deploying the same quantum lock technology. "We've neutralized your key defense stations across 12 systems," Minho explained. "We could have attacked without warning, just as you did to our colonists. But that is not our way." For the first time in his life, Admiral Dex felt fear. "What do you want?" "Justice," Minho said simply. "Colonel Su-Min is returning to Centauri Prime with our terms. The Council will acknowledge its crime against our people. It will pay reparations to the families of the victims, and it will accept reforms to prevent such atrocities in the future." Dex's voice shook with anger. "Or what?" Minho's eyes were hard as steel. "Or we will do what you never expected. We will free the galaxy from the Council's tyranny." Around him, the bridge crew of the human ship stood tall and ready. For the first time in centuries, the Council faced a species that had prepared for their betrayal. Colonel Su-Min stood at the center of the Council chamber on Centauri Prime. The room was packed with representatives from all Council worlds. News of Earth's stunning takeover of the punitive fleet had spread across the galaxy. High Commander Vex glared down at her from his raised seat. "This is an act of war," he said, his voice shaking with anger. "You will all pay for this treachery." Su-Min's face remained calm. "No, Commander. This is an act of justice." She pressed a button on her wrist device. The large screens around the chamber came to life, showing the disabled Council fleet surrounded by Earth ships. "We could have destroyed your fleet," Su-Min said. "We could have attacked without warning, just as you did to our colonists in the Cygnus sector. But we are not like you." She pressed another button. The screens now showed images of the 50,000 colonists before their execution. Families working, children playing, communities growing. "These people broke no laws," Su-Min continued. "They settled on unclaimed land. You changed the rules later and punished them for rules that didn't exist when they arrived." Many Council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Some looked away from the screens. "Earth demands 3 things," Su-Min announced. "First, a public acknowledgement of this crime. Second, reparations to the families of the victims. And third, reforms to ensure this never happens again. Not to us. Not to anyone." Vex laughed bitterly. "And if we refuse?" Su-Min looked him straight in the eyes. "Then we will share what we know with everyone." She pressed a third button. The screens changed again, now showing internal Council messages, secret plans, hidden decisions, covered-up atrocities against other species. "We have been gathering intelligence since we joined the Council," Sumin explained. We know about the Delcan rebellion you crushed. We know about the Sorin disease you created to control their population. We know everything. A wave of whispers spread through the chamber. Some council members looked shocked, others guilty. You would bring down the entire galactic order? Asked an alien representative from the third row. No, Sumin replied. We would reform it. Return it to what it was meant to be, a place of justice and cooperation, not tyranny. She turned to address the entire chamber. Our terms have already been sent to every council world, not just to governments, but directly to citizens. People across the galaxy are watching how you respond. On thousands of planets, billions of beings were indeed watching. The Earth ships had bypassed official channels and broadcast directly to the public. For the first time, many citizens were learning about the Council's darker actions. Observant Kerr, the ancient alien who had warned the Council about underestimating humans, slowly stood up. I move that we accept the human terms, he said, his voice carrying despite its softness. Not because they have forced us to, but because they are right. One by one, other representatives stood up. Not all, but enough. Vex watched in disbelief as his support crumbled. This is how it begins, he spat. The end of order. No, Sumin corrected him. This is how justice begins. 3 days later, on a solemn broadcast watched across the galaxy, the Council formally acknowledged the illegal execution of the human colonists. They agreed to pay reparations and to form a new committee to draft reforms. Admiral Jinwu watched the broadcast from Earth with mixed feelings. Do you think they'll honor the agreement? He asked Commander Daho. Some will, Daho replied. Others will resist. Change never comes easily. Jinwu nodded. That's why we're keeping our fleet ready. Trust, but verify. Across the galaxy, something unexpected was happening. On dozens of worlds, citizens were taking to the streets, not in protest, but in support of the humans. Species that had suffered under the Council's harsh rule for centuries saw hope for the first time. Earth had wanted justice for its people. It might end up bringing justice to the entire galaxy. 2 weeks had passed since the Council agreed to Earth's terms. On the surface, peace had returned. But beneath that calm, a storm was brewing. In a private chamber deep within the Council Tower, High Commander Vex met with leaders from 12 Council species. Their faces showed anger and fear. This humiliation cannot stand, Vex said, pounding his fist on the table. Humans have made us look weak. Other species are now questioning our authority. Admiral Dex, who had led the failed mission to Earth, nodded. My sources tell me protests have broken out on 27 worlds. The rabble are demanding reforms like the humans. Then we must crush this rebellion before it spreads, said Morek, leader of a warrior species known for their cruelty. I propose we use the Omega weapon. A hush fell over the room. The Omega weapon was the Council's deepest secret, a device capable of destroying an entire star system. It had been built centuries ago, but never used. Yes, Vex agreed after a long pause. We will make an example of Earth that none will forget. Meanwhile, in another part of the Council Tower, Dr. Yuna worked tirelessly. She had stayed behind when Sumin returned to Earth, posing as a cultural attaché. Her real mission was to establish contact with resistance movements that had long operated in the shadows. Your message reached us, said Talia, a thin alien with purple skin. She represented a species that had suffered under Council rule for generations. But how can we trust humans? You are newcomers to our galaxy. Judge us by our actions, Yuna replied. We could have destroyed the Council fleet. Instead, we chose justice over vengeance. Over the next days, Yuna met with representatives from 18 different resistance groups. Some were skeptical, others eager for alliance. All had stories of Council oppression. On Earth, Admiral Jinwu received reports of these meetings with growing hope. We are not alone in wanting change, he told the Defense Council. There are allies out there. But their plans were interrupted when a coded message arrived from Observant Cure. Omiga we apon tuari pairing. Earth targeted. 3 days. Alarms spread through Earth's leadership. The Omega weapon was only a rumor, but if real, it could destroy their entire solar system. All ships to defensive positions. Jinwu ordered. Activate the quantum shield network around the sun. But even as Earth prepared for the worst, events on Centauri Prime took an unexpected turn. Junior officers in the Council fleet, led by Captain Lorne, had learned of the plan to use the Omega weapon. Many had watched Earth's broadcasts and questioned the Council's actions. They planned to destroy an entire civilization to maintain their power. Lorne told his fellow officers in a secret meeting, "Is this what we serve? Is this what we fight for?" The next day, as the Omega weapon was being prepared for transport to its launch site, something unprecedented happened. 300 Council officers refused their orders. When military police tried to arrest them, more officers joined their side. By nightfall, half the Council fleet had mutinied. The officers secured the Omega weapon facility and sent a message to both the Council and Earth. "We will not participate in genocide." Vex was livid. Traitors, all of them. But the mutiny spread like wildfire. More ships declared their support for the rebels. Citizens took to the streets across Centauri Prime, demanding the resignation of Council leaders who had ordered the execution of the human colonists. Dr. Yuna watched these events unfold with amazement. She sent a message to Earth. "The Council is fracturing from within. The Omega threat is contained." On Earth, people celebrated this news. What had begun as a demand for justice for their murdered colonists had turned into something much bigger, a galaxy-wide movement for freedom and reform. The Council's 300-year reign of unchallenged power was coming to an end. 1 year had passed since the Council crisis. Today, representatives from over 200 species gathered on a massive space station that orbited a special place, the exact spot where 50,000 human colonists had once been executed. The station was called Memorial, and it served as the headquarters for the new Galactic Assembly that had replaced the Council. Commander Daho, now Earth's chief representative, stood by a large window looking out at the stars. So much had changed in a year. High Commander Vex and his closest allies had been arrested by their own people. The trial had been broadcast across the galaxy, showing evidence of centuries of crimes. Justice had finally caught up with them. "Nervous?" asked Sumin, joining Daho at the window. He smiled. "A little. It's not every day you sign a new charter for galactic government." The main chamber of the station was filled with beings of all shapes and sizes. Some floated in special tanks, others needed breathing masks, but all were equal here. The days of privileged species were over. Admiral Jinwu, now Earth's president, took the central platform. Beside him stood Observant Cure and Captain Lorne, whose mutiny had helped prevent disaster. 1 year ago, Jinwu began. A terrible crime brought us to a turning point. 50,000 lives were lost. But from that tragedy, a new hope was born. He gestured to the charter displayed on screens around the room. "This document ensures that power will never again be concentrated in the hands of a few. All worlds, all species have an equal voice." The charter had taken months to draft. It guaranteed rights for all sentient beings. It established courts where even the powerful could be held accountable. Most importantly, it created checks and balances to prevent any group from gaining too much control. One by one, representatives approached to sign. Species that had once been enemies now stood side by side. Even former Council loyalists, their governments now reformed, joined the new assembly. When it was Daho's turn to sign, he paused, thinking of the colonists whose deaths had led to this moment. He signed his name clearly, then stepped back. "It is done," Jinwu announced when the last signature was added. "The Galactic Assembly is now official." Cheers erupted throughout the chamber and on thousands of worlds where people watched the broadcast. Later, during the celebration, Daho found himself talking with Talia. the purple-skinned alien who had initially been skeptical of humans. "My people suffered under the Council for 500 years, she said. "We never imagined change was possible until Earth showed us it could be done. We simply did what was right," Daho replied. "That is rare in this galaxy," Talia said with a sad smile. "But perhaps it will become more common now." As the celebration continued, Daho slipped away to a quiet part of the station. Here, a memorial wall displayed the names and faces of the 50,000 colonists who had died. He placed his hand on the cool surface, reading some of the names. Dr. Yuna found him there. "The opening ceremony for the memorial is tomorrow," she said softly. "Families of the victims will be attending." Daho nodded. "Will they think it was worth it? Their loved ones died, and we built a new government." "They died because of the Council's cruelty," Yuna reminded him. "What we built ensures their deaths weren't meaningless." As they spoke, a small ship docked at the station. From it emerged Captain Jishu, returning from a mission to the far reaches of the galaxy. She carried exciting news: contact with 3 previously unknown species who wished to join the assembly. The galaxy was growing larger, more connected, and more just. That night, as Daho prepared for sleep, he looked out once more at the stars. The old council had ruled for 300 years through fear and cruelty. The new assembly would face challenges, disagreements, and setbacks. Democracy was never easy. But as he watched ships of all shapes and sizes passing by the memorial station, Daho felt something he hadn't expected: hope, not just for humans, but for all who called this vast galaxy home. Justice had been served, and from justice, peace had grown.